In Jewish society, there is a custom of celebrating the festival of Purim. Its origins stem from an incident that occurred during the Babylonian captivity, when the Jews were under Persian rule. Let's take a look at the book of Esther in the Bible, where it is written.
During the time of Ahasuerus, he held a banquet for all his officials and servants. The king, in high spirits from wine, ordered Queen Vashti to come wearing her royal crown, to display her beauty before the officials. However, Queen Vashti refused to obey the king's command. So, the king consulted wise men on how to deal with the queen. The eunuch answered, "Let a royal decree be issued that Queen Vashti is not to come before the king, and let the position of queen be given to someone else who is more worthy." Thus, the king sent out letters decreeing that every man should be the master of his own household. Young men suggested to the king, "Let beautiful virgins be sought for the king, and let the one who pleases the king be made queen in place of Vashti."
Vashti could no longer enter the palace.
In the citadel of Susa, there was a Jewish man named Mordecai. Mordecai had raised Esther. This girl was both beautiful in appearance and in character. When the king's decree was proclaimed, Esther was also taken to the palace. Esther did not reveal her nationality or her family background. The girls were each taken to King Ahasuerus in turn. If a girl pleased the king, she would be chosen, otherwise, she would not go back to the king again. The king loved Esther more than any of the other women. He placed the royal crown on her head and made her queen in place of Vashti.
Esther is one of the top 3 beauties in the Bible. Her beauty surpassed even that of the former queen, Vashti.
One time while Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, 2 eunuchs became angry and sought to kill King Ahasuerus. When Mordecai learned of this, he reported it to Queen Esther in the name of Mordecai. When an inquiry was made into this matter, those 2 were hanged on the gallows. This event was recorded in the Book of Annals in the presence of the king.
The name of Mordecai was not disclosed to the king himself.
King Ahasuerus promoted Haman and placed him above all the officials. But Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor. Haman was enraged against Mordecai and looked for a way to destroy all the Jews. Haman said to the king, "There is a certain people who keep themselves separate, and do not obey your laws. If it pleases the king, let a decree be issued to destroy them." So the king took off his signet ring and gave it to Haman, saying, "Keep the money and do with the people as you please." Then on the 13th day orders were written out to all the king's provinces to destroy the Jews, as Haman had proposed.
Jews do not worship or bow down to any god other than their own. Bowing down to Haman would have been tantamount to idol worship.
Mordecai learned all that had been done. There was great mourning and lamentation among the Jews in every province. Many put on sackcloth and ashes. Queen Esther was deeply distressed and sent clothes for Mordecai to put on, but he would not accept them. Esther summoned Hathach and ordered him to go to Mordecai to learn what this was all about and why it was happening. Mordecai informed him of the exact amount of money Haman had promised to pay into the king's treasury to destroy the Jews. Mordecai also showed Esther a copy of the written decree to destroy the Jews. He told her to go to the king to beg him for mercy for her people.
Having the king's ring meant attaining a position equivalent to that of a prime minister. The decrees sent throughout Persia bore the seal of the king's ring. Mordecai understood this.
Esther said, "There is a law concerning any man or woman who goes to the inner court to the king without being summoned. That person must be put to death. Only if the king holds out the golden scepter to him will he live. I have not been summoned to go to the king for the last 30 days. Mordecai says to Esther, "Do not think that because you are in the palace you alone will escape the fate of all the Jews." Esther said, "Gather all the Jews in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 full days, night and day. My attendants and I will also fast in the same way. Even though it is against the law, I will go to the king. If I must die, then I die." Mordecai went and did everything Esther had commanded him.
To stand before the king without being summoned carried the possibility of facing the death penalty. Esther risked her life to make a direct appeal to the king.
On the third day, Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner courtyard of the palace. When the king saw Queen Esther standing in the courtyard, he held out the golden scepter toward her. So Esther approached and touched the end of the scepter. The king said to her, "What is it, Queen Esther? What do you want? Ask me for anything." Esther replied, "If it pleases your majesty, would you and Haman come today to the banquet I have prepared for you?" Then the king said, "As you wish." So the king and Haman went to the banquet that Esther had prepared. While they were drinking wine, the king asked Esther, "Tell me what you want. I will give you anything up to half my kingdom." Esther answered, "Please come again tomorrow with Haman to the banquet I have prepared."
Even during the first banquet, Esther was able to make a direct appeal to save the Jews. However, she waited for the right moment to speak to the king, timing her words carefully.
That day Haman left, happy and in good spirits. But when Haman saw Mordecai at the gate of the king's court refusing to stand up for him. However, Haman restrained himself and went home. There he sent for his friends and his wife Zeresh and told them everything that had happened to him, including how the king had promoted him and given him a high position above all the other officials and servants. Haman said, "What is more, Queen Esther invited no one except me to accompany the king to the banquet she had prepared. I am invited back tomorrow along with the king." His wife said to him, "Have a pole set up, 50 cubits high, and ask the king in the morning to have Mordecai impaled on it." This suggestion pleased Haman, so he had the pole set up.
Esther's banquet and Haman's plot to kill Mordecai were progressing almost simultaneously. If they had been even slightly out of sync, Esther's uncle Mordecai might have been hanged on the gallows.
That night, sleep escaped the king, so he ordered the book of records, the Chronicles, to be brought in and read to him. It was found recorded there that Mordecai had reported about the plot of the two eunuchs who had sought to assassinate King Ahasuerus. So the king asked, "What recognition or honor has been given to Mordecai for this act?" The servants answered, "Nothing has been done for him." The king asked, "Who is in the courtyard?" The servants answered, "Haman is in the courtyard." The king said, "Have him come in." The king asked Haman, "What should be done for the man the king wishes to honor?" Haman said to the king, "For the one you wish to honor, bring the royal robes you have worn, and the horse you have ridden with a royal crown on its head. Then let one of your most noble officials dress the man you wish to honor. Lead him on the horse through the city square, and proclaim, 'This is what is done for the man the king delights to honor.'"
It was by chance that Mordecai reported the assassination plot to the king. However, at this moment, Haman is unaware that Mordecai is the one the king intends to honor.
Then the king told Haman, "Quickly, take the robe and horse, just as you have described, and do this for Mordecai the Jew, who sits at the king's gate. Do not leave out anything you suggested." So Haman took the robe and horse, dressed Mordecai, led him through the city square on horseback, proclaiming before him, "This is what is done for the man whom the king wishes to honor." Afterward, Mordecai returned to the king's gate, but Haman rushed home, covered his head in grief, and related all that had happened to his wife Zeresh and his advisors. His wife Zeresh and all his advisors said to him, "You are beginning to lose power to Mordecai. Since Mordecai is a Jew, you cannot overcome him. You will surely fall before him." While they were still speaking with Haman, the king's eunuchs arrived, and rushed Haman to the banquet that Esther had prepared.
Without delay, as Haman is preparing to take revenge on Mordecai, the second day of Esther's banquet begins.
The king and Haman arrived and drank with Queen Esther. The king asked Esther, "What is your request? It shall be granted to you." Queen Esther replied, "Grant me my request and spare the lives of my people." for my people and I have been sentenced to be exterminated, killed, and destroyed." King Ahasuerus asked Queen Esther, "Who is responsible for such a plot?" Esther answered, "The persecutor, the enemy, is this Haman." Haman trembled before the king and queen. The king, filled with anger, stormed out. Haman, realizing his perilous situation, stayed behind to plead for his life to Queen Esther. When the king returned, he found Haman prostrated before Esther. "Are you going to assault the queen?" As soon as the king uttered these words, Haman's face was covered. One of the eunuchs said, "There is a gallows at Haman's house, prepared for Mordecai." Then the king ordered, "Hang him on it." Thus, Haman was hanged on the gallows he had prepared for Mordecai.
It can be said that the king's affection for Esther was stronger than that of Haman, who gave her the ring.
The king took off his signet ring, which he had taken back from Haman, and gave it to Mordecai. Esther prostrated herself at the king's feet and begged him, so the king extended the golden scepter to Esther. Then Esther stood before the king and said, "Please issue a decree to revoke the letters written by Haman, which ordered the destruction of the Jews." King Ahasuerus said to Queen Esther and Mordecai, "I have given Haman's estate to Esther, and he was hanged on the gallows. Now you may write in the king's name whatever pleases you concerning the Jews, and seal it with the king's signet ring. For no document written in the king's name and sealed with his ring can be revoked." Accordingly, letters were written in the name of King Ahasuerus and sealed with his ring. And they were sent to the Jews in every province, including the governors, as Mordecai had ordered. Mordecai wrote in the name of King Ahasuerus and sealed the letters with the king's signet ring. On the 13th day of the 12th month, the decree and law of the king were executed. On this day, the enemies of the Jews had hoped to overpower them, but the situation was reversed, and the Jews overpowered those who hated them. On that day, no one could stand against the Jews because they feared Mordecai. When the king was informed of the number of people killed in the citadel of Susa, he asked Queen Esther, "The Jews have killed 500 men in the citadel of Susa, including Haman's 10 sons. What have they done in the rest of the king's provinces? Now what is your petition?" Esther replied, "Hang Haman's 10 sons on the gallows." So Haman's 10 sons were hanged on the gallows.
During that time, it was commonplace for children to grow up and seek revenge. Therefore, Esther was sowing seeds to ensure that such wicked advisors would not emerge in the future.
The Jewish people designated the 14th and 15th days of the month of Adar each year as days to feast together and to give gifts to the poor. This new holiday, thanks to a beautiful Jewish woman named Esther, was named Purim. She maintained Jewish pride even while being raised in the midst of Persia. This holiday is still celebrated among the Jewish people even after 3,000 years.
Thank you for watching the video until the end. If you enjoyed it, please consider subscribing to the channel.